Everyone remembers Lelouch as a genius, but nobody actually understands what he did. He didn't just plan a rebellion, he manipulated an entire planet step by step. So I rewatched all of Code Geass and mapped out every move Lelouch made to become the villain of the world on purpose, breaking down every genius move he made for Zero Requiem and uniting the planet through hatred, forcing the world to purge tyranny. Now from the start, we know Lelouch's life is built on tragedy. Despite him being the 11th prince of the world's greatest superpower, his mother Marianne was assassinated inside the royal palace, and his little sister Nunnally was scarred, left blind and unable to walk. Lelouch begged his father, Emperor Charles, to investigate her murder, but guess what? He did nothing. He didn't care. He called compassion weakness. And then came the betrayal. Lelouch and Nunnally were exiled to Japan as political pawns, and shortly after, Britannia invaded Japan, erased its name and renamed it to Area 11. This moment defines Lelouch forever. He loses his mother, his home, his name, and even his place in the world, all because he was born weak in a system that worships power. So the only thing he had left that he cared for was his sister Nunnally. As a result, Lelouch declared war on his family, who threatened her future, but the only thing that was missing was power. From the outside, Britannia looks like the greatest empire in the world, a nation that conquered a third of the planet. But King Charles believes kindness is a lie. He believes war is truth, as conflict reveals who is strong enough to shape the world. And with truth to this statement, Lelouch's master plan would come into fruition the moment he fell upon the Geass power. Episode 1 already gives us all we need to know about our MC, and it's in the chess game scene against the Britannian noble. Lelouch breaks every conventional rule by leading with his king. To anyone else, that's way too risky and it's basically pressing Alt F4 to delete yourself. But for him, it's his greatest statement. If the king doesn't lead, how does he expect his subordinates to follow? Now this worldview defines Lelouch's entire identity. His belief centers on achieving revolutionary change through a necessary greater evil, believing that the existing world requires a violent overthrow of the system, and he takes full responsibility, even if it means getting his hands dirty and sacrificing the people he treasures most. In other words, the ends justify the means, and a strong leader is needed to bring that to reality. This is exemplified when he gets his Geass. Lelouch meets C2 during the Shinjuku ghetto incident, and he's about to get executed by Britannian soldiers. C2 offers him a contract. She gives him a mysterious power called the Geass, which is probably the most overpowered eye in all of anime. But in return, Lelouch must one day fulfill her wish. Now the moment he awakens that power, he gives his first command for all of them to die. An entire squad of armed soldiers basically destroy themselves instantly. Lelouch doesn't care if he becomes a devil, as long as he gets the power to change the world. But what is Geass? Well, it's called the power of kings, a supernatural ability that bends human will. Lelouch's version lets him issue absolute commands that cannot be resisted, but this power comes with rules. Lelouch can only command each person one time. Once they've been Geassed, he can never use it again on them. The target must hear and understand his command, and he has to be within a certain range for it to take hold. Now the most terrifying part about it is that once a command is given, it can never be undone. It doesn't fade over time. If Lelouch tells you to live, like he did with Suzaku, you will keep obeying that command for years. However, at this point, Lelouch was caught in the crossfire between Britannia's soldiers and a small Japanese rebellion group. Now I'm not gonna say the T word because we don't want to get demonetized, so I'm gonna say rebellion group from now on. but you know it's actually a T group in the anime. Now, this is where we get to see Lelouch's 5D chess genius move for the very first time, as he plays this life or death situation like a game of chess. When he's caught by Villetta, he fabricates a noble identity to trick her into stepping out of a nightmare. Then he uses Geass to take her nightmare frame in order to coordinate the T's in battle. He then surveys the battlefield. Britannian forces are overconfident, whilst the Japanese resistance is disorganized and panicking. But guess what? Lelouch sees a pattern in the chaos and builds a battle plan in real time. So disguised as an anonymous strategist, he begins issuing orders to resistance squads who don't even know who he is. He predicts enemy routes, controls their positioning, and even uses the terrain as a weapon. Now, one of the best examples is the underground track. He directs Callan to collapse the support, burying Britannian squads alive. All of this allows him to take complete control of both sides and basically walk right into Clovis's private chamber, revealing to his elder brother that he's alive and has come back to change everything. And this is where we swiftly find out that family bonds, well, they mean nothing to Lelouch. I mean, Clovis is a terrible person. He doesn't care about the Japanese people or his subjects. He's just as bad as the rest. So after using his Geass to ask him if he knows what happened to his mother, he knows nothing. So Lelouch then kills him with no hesitation. But guess what? The mad lad goes back to school like it's a regular Tuesday. Like, think about it. Dude just created a perfect victory for a Japanese resistance group, killed the third prince of a fascist empire, and then went to English class like nothing happened. But even at the Ashford Academy, he's gathering information. Lelouch started testing Geass to learn the rules I explained earlier. He then approaches Callan, using Geass to confirm her true identity as a member of the resistance group he helped. However, she isn't an idiot, and she knows that Lelouch is more than he seems. Now, when she corners him in the academy bathroom and presses him, it looks like Lelouch has finally been exposed. She even pulls a knife ready to force the truth out of him. But Lelouch, he's already 3 steps ahead, people. He plays dumb, and just when Callan is certain he's lying, the phone rings. On the other end is Zero. His distorted voice gives her instructions to meet him at Tokyo Tower. And just like that, Lelouch's genius strategy works by using Geass earlier to pre-record that phone message through his maid. He convinces Callan that Zero and Lelouch are 2 completely different people. Speaking of which, the next genius move Lelouch makes is the establishment of Zero. He crafts Zero's identity with a costume, voice, and mystery. Now, to the resistance, he becomes a revolutionary symbol, and to Britannia, he's a threat. Lelouch chooses the perfect public stage, Suzaku's prisoner transfer, as a way to reveal Zero and save his best friend. The gun used by Lelouch to kill Clovis had Suzaku's fingerprints supposedly all over it. He denies having seen that gun, but nobody believes him. Lloyd states that Suzaku's predicament is pretty much hopeless, as no one really wants him to be exonerated. Also, something I forgot to mention earlier is that Callan's group was carrying what both Britannia and they believed to be poison gas, but in reality this was actually C2. But to every Britannian military member transferring Suzaku, they never saw the inside. Lelouch then drives up in a mock-up of Prince Clovis's personal cruiser to catch the attention of both civilians and the military. He then reveals the poison gas, and Jeremiah says that he's been able to take every person here hostage without them even knowing it. Lelouch then uses this opportunity to establish Zero as the true killer of Prince Clovis, exposing himself to the entire empire. Even Dietard, a Britannian reporter, he comments on how this is just one big performance to him, which made him a top tier Zero Glazer, by the way. He's a fan from then on. Lelouch then manipulates Jeremiah by whispering a meaningless code word orange. This is just a bluff. He literally came up with it on the fly. But at this point, all the attention was on Zero, and this turned Jeremiah's pride into paranoia. It's pure psychological warfare. And by the time Lelouch uses Geass to order Jeremiah to free Suzaku and let Zero get away, well, the guy's mind is already spiraling downward and he's going crazy. So when Zero escapes on live television, his legend is born. Zero even reaches out to Suzaku and asks him to join his cause, not as an enemy, but as an ally to tear down Britannia's corrupt empire. But Suzaku refuses. He believes the system can be changed from the inside, but Lelouch doesn't need him because something far bigger has begun. The idea of Zero has taken root. People see hope, a man who defied Britannia and got away with it. And in response, they send someone who doesn't lose, Princess Cornelia, to crush him before he becomes a real threat. Now by episode 7, we finally see the true depth of Lelouch's hatred for the Britannian Empire and how he ended up in Japan. After the death of his mother Marianne, Lelouch confronts the emperor, his own father Charles, demanding answers. But instead of sympathy, Lelouch walks into a throne room full of nobles, whispering like vultures, treating his mother's death as nothing more than gossip. And Charles? Well, he doesn't even pretend to care. When Lelouch begs for justice, Charles dismisses Marianne as weak and tells Lelouch that he has no worth, that both he and Nunnally are nothing but expendable pawns. But in the present, obviously, Lelouch is familiar with Cornelia, and so he takes her challenge head on, entering the Saitama ghetto to study her. Cornelia is a commander who believes in decisive domination. Her doctrine is built on overwhelming force with no room for retreat or negotiation. She crushes resistance before it has time to grow. And unlike most royalty, Cornelia fights on the front line, earning her soldiers' loyalty through fear and respect. Eventually, outside the walls of the school, Britannian forces have surrounded the Saitama ghetto. Cornelia has organized this attack in order to create similar conditions to those of the skirmish in the Shinjuku ghetto. This is in hopes of drawing out Zero. They even broadcast their time of attack on the news. Now, of course, Lelouch knows that this is a trap, but he decides to go anyway. He infiltrates her forces, hijacks a nightmare, and uses enemy communication lines to coordinate Japan's scattered resistance group. He tries to confuse Britannia's systems, manipulating their targeting and forcing friendly fire. And even though the plan ultimately fails, it's by design. Lelouch learns that Cornelia is not like Clovis, and to defeat her, he'll need an army. But with her victory, a problem arises. Cornelia orders every nightmare to open up and reveal who is inside. Lelouch starts to panic as they will obviously be able to catch him. But fortunately, C2, she shows up dressed as Zero and everyone gets distracted. Lelouch then uses this chance to escape and vows to raise up a nation that won't lose to Britannia. And now that the groundwork is set, the Hoto Kawaguchi hostage crisis, it becomes the perfect opportunity for Lelouch's next genius move. And that is to legitimize Zero. A group from the Japan Liberation Front takes a Hoto hostage, including most of the Ashford Student Council and a disguised Princess Euphemia. Until now, Zero has only been seen as an anarchist, but Lelouch knows that to build a real army, he doesn't just need soldiers, he needs public support. So he doesn't just save the hostages, he turns the entire operation into a theater in a 5D chess move. Euphemia is Cornelia's beloved little sister, and that changes everything. Not only can Lelouch use her to control her next moves, but saving her allows him to reshape Zero's image. He's no longer just fighting Britannia, he protects civilians and even royal ones, which pretty much makes it a calculated moral rebrand. And inside the hotel, Lelouch runs the operation operation like a precision heist. Explosives are placed only when necessary, and he uses Geass only when he needs to, maintaining the illusion that Zero wins with genius intellect and not power. And on top of that, he exposes the so-called resistance group as frauds who were willing to kill the innocent, and then he exposes Britannia as corrupt for refusing to negotiate. So that leaves Zero as the only moral option for the public. And then comes the grand reveal, people. As the hotel collapses behind him in a controlled explosion, Zero saves all the hostages, and Britannia can't do anything to harm him due to collateral damage. He then broadcasts a declaration to the world, announcing the purpose of his Black Knights, allies of justice who will judge the world and protect the weak from those with power. This is the birth of Zero as a global idea. And by the way, Todd Reed, the media journalist, he blazes like never before, realizing that Zero has a story that can change the world, and he wants to be the man who will broadcast it, which in a way was another genius play at hand. For Zero to control the media, it means he can control worldwide perception. However, Lelouch's best friend Suzaku believes in a complete opposite philosophy, because by episode 9, they even talk about it. He thinks real change must come from within the system, and Suzaku's beliefs aren't random. He lives with guilt. He once made a choice that destroyed his own country, and now he desperately clings to law and duty to justify his existence. He needs to believe the system can change, because if it can't, then his own sins were meaningless. Suzaku doesn't understand why the Black Knights don't just join the police or army if they want justice, and Lelouch counters him. Systems like Britannia are so rotten that good people are trapped inside them, but Suzaku refuses to believe that. He calls Zero selfish, a man with no honor, using justice as an excuse for revenge, and Lelouch then realizes something important in that moment. Suzaku despises Zero, and worse, he's starting to feel more at home with Britannia. But it doesn't end there, because that conversation with Suzaku, it plants a dangerous thought in Lelouch's mind. People really do justify Britannia's rule if they think it gives them safety or comfort, and his best friend becomes proof of that. He believes order is better than freedom if it prevents chaos. So Lelouch decides to test that idea not on an enemy, but on someone close to him, and her name is Callan. While sitting with her at school, Lelouch pretends to argue Suzaku's worldview. He states maybe Britannia isn't entirely wrong. Maybe life under the Empire brings stability, and maybe becoming an honorary Britannian is the smarter path than dying for freedom. And then as a result, Callan gets furious. She slaps him and calls him arrogant for even suggesting that surrender is better than resistance. And that's when Lelouch smiles, because it was actually a loyalty test. He needed to know who would stand firm when their beliefs were challenged. Callan wants to burn the system down just like him, while Suzaku doesn't. And now Lelouch can use both those beliefs later on in his Zero Requiem plan. The next major turning point for Lelouch is the Battle of Narita, one of his most complex and ruthless operations yet. Cornelia thinks she has Zero trapped. She surrounds the resistance forces in the mountains to wipe them out in one decisive strike, but Lelouch turns her trap into his strategy. After surveying the terrain, he notices the unstable rock formations and underground water reserves throughout Mount Narita. But this mission isn't about winning. If he can capture Cornelia alive, he can finally interrogate her about the truth behind his mother's assassination. Cornelia idolized Marianne and investigated her murder for years, but even she never learned that V2 was the one who orchestrated it. So Lelouch lays the groundwork for one of his biggest brain strategies so far. He secretly plants explosives and electrodes across the mountain, setting the stage for an engineered landslide. When Cornelia commits her entire army, Lelouch triggers the avalanche, burying whole Britannian armies alive under a tidal wave of earth and mud. And with Callan utilizing her new Gurren Mk2, she takes out 80% of the Britannian forces. So as a result, the Black Knights score a crushing victory victory, and for the first time, Zero proves he can beat Britannia the Empire. But this victory, it comes with consequences. It causes heavy civilian casualties in the nearby settlement, and Lelouch knows and moves forward anyway. So this is where Lelouch begins to cross the line from revolutionary to necessary evil. And even so, he then corners Cornelia, finally ready to force the truth out of her. But before he can, guess who arrives? Suzaku gets in the way of Lelouch's answers.
Come on now, dawg. Come on, man.
Suzaku is done talking. He pulls out the 9 gun on Zero and he prepares to end him right there. But before he can shoot, C2 appears and touches the Lancelot. A Geass shockwave triggers a shared mental hallucination. Suzaku is suddenly confronted by an image of his father, Genbu, the Prime Minister of Japan, and he breaks down stating, "I didn't have a choice." This hints at Suzaku's dark past. He killed his own father to stop Japan from resisting Britannia and sacrificing their military for a lost cause. Genbu also planned to kill Nanali as a political favor, which was just another reason Suzaku killed his own dad. And after the Battle of Narita, Lelouch isn't just a masked rebel anymore. He's now a threat big enough to challenge Britannia head on. But strategy alone can't win a war. So to build a revolution, you need infrastructure, supplies, weapons, funding, and allies, right? So Lelouch moves on to his next genius phase, turning the Black Knights into a nation in the shadows. And that begins with the Kyoto House, a group of 6 wealthy industrialist families of Japan, who use their position to form an elite resistance network, secretly funneling money and tech to anti-Britannian groups. The Black Knights had attracted their attention after the fight, and so they summoned Zero for a private meeting. But this is not a friendly invitation. Kyoto wants to test Zero. No one funds a revolutionary without knowing who they're following. So Lelouch makes a calculated gamble. He sends C2 as a decoy Zero, whilst he meets Kyoto's leader Taizo Kirihara alone. Now, why, you may ask? Well, because Lelouch needs Kyoto to trust the man, not the mask. So for the first time, he reveals his true identity to someone outside his inner circle. This left Kirihara stunned, but he wasn't afraid. And we come to learn why this wasn't a risk, but a genius play at hand. Kirihara knew Lelouch as a child back when Japan and Britannia still had political ties, and he believed Lelouch had died long ago. But now he realizes Zero isn't a T, he's an exiled prince declaring war on his own empire. So understanding Zero's motives and ambitions are actually personal. He doesn't just give Lelouch support, bro gives him resources, nightmare frames, funding, and political connections. And with Kyoto behind him, Lelouch officially becomes more than a masked rebel. He becomes leader of an army. This is also the moment Lelouch gains something even more important than just weapons, by the way. He gets full media control. Remember, Zero's #1 glazer died hard? Well, just when you thought he had glazed more than he could, he decides to officially join the Black Knights so he can go even further and beyond. Though not as a soldier, but as the voice of the revolution. And with scaling at this operation to a nation-level threat, Lelouch's big brain had allowed him to consolidate and maintain control within the Black Knights, like managing internal dissent with subtle authority, like giving Tamaki responsibility, promoting Ogi, and reinforcing trust in Zero's leadership. Now, up until now, Lelouch has treated Geass like the ultimate weapon, a tool only he controls. But then comes Mao, a Geass user whose power evolved out of control. He can read minds, every thought, every fear, and every lie. However, what looks like an advantage is actually torture, as he can't turn it off. So Mao becomes obsessed with C2, the one person he can't read. as she was the one who gave him the Geass. Now sadly, after abandoning him, Mao is driven by insanity and jealousy, becoming Lelouch's first psychological enemy by targeting the people around him, starting with the grieving Shirley. Her father was one of the victims of the collateral damage killed in Narita due to the landslide, right? Mao twists her grief and confusion until she discovers that Lelouch is Zero, and in her pain, she nearly kills him. This forced Lelouch to make one of the coldest decisions in the entire story. He erases Shirley's memories. He wipes away her love, her trust, and every moment that they share. And this is where he begins to lose pieces of his humanity. But the nail in the coffin is when Mao escalates things even further by kidnapping Nunnally and strapping her to a device under the school to kill her. And this forces Lelouch into a trap. Beat Mao in chess or his sister dies. But how do you beat a man who can read your every thought, you ask? Well, of course, with Lelouch's big genius level plays, he's too big brain. Lelouch, after secretly requesting Suzaku to rescue Nunnally, he uses the Geass on himself to erase his own memory of the plan. So even Mao can't even read his mind. So yeah, you just heard that right. He weaponized his own memory. So Suzaku detonates the bomb safely. Mao is beaten and C2 ends his suffering. But what this character does is he's a reminder of the truth. Geass isn't a blessing, it's actually a curse. If you lose control of it, it can take everything from you, right? And this is just a foreshadowing of what's to come. And it's not only that, Mao left lasting damage on Lelouch because he begins losing control, not on the battlefield, but of his emotions. His war against Britannia is becoming personal, and that makes him vulnerable. And no one exposes that vulnerability more than his best friend Suzaku, because after realizing how much he needs him to protect his sister, Lelouch decides to request him as her official protector, only to learn that this entire time, Suzaku has been the Lancelot Knight in the nightmare, thwarting all his plans all along, making them fail. So this sends Lelouch into a deep spiral. His best friend is now his greatest enemy, and despite Lelouch willing to give up most of his humanity and stuff, his closest attachments keep him grounded. This culminates in one of Lelouch's most consequential moves, when he gives Suzaku the Geass command to live. This isn't really a genius strategy, but it comes into play much later on as one of his greatest obstacles and weapons. However, on the bright side, Britannia is panicking, they're shitting their bricks. But then comes the one person Lelouch never wanted to fight, Princess Euphemia Brittania. Unlike the rest of the family, Euphy is genuinely kind. She doesn't want power, she doesn't want war. Zero would continue his operations, even revealing his identity to his sister Euphemia, who insists all the fighting stops and that Suzaku and Lelouch should come together as friends once again. But our MC is against that. He spent his whole life seeking this, and despite having no animosity for Euphemia, he's willing to stand against her if need be. But his sister further proves her point when a Japanese rebel teams up with the Chinese Federation in Kyushu. In this moment, Zero surprises the Britannia forces by siding with them, further emphasizing that the Black Knights fight against all who stand in the way of justice. He leads a frontal assault in the Gawain alongside Lancelot, and despite giving Britannia the credit, Daitard realizes that rumors will spread about the Black Knights' involvement, telling the whole world where they stand. However, Euphemia, who just wants peace, she does something that Lelouch never expected. She offers Japan freedom without war. She proposes the Special Administrative Zone of Japan, a legal territory where Japan's people would get their name and identity back, no longer being called 11s with prejudice. So for the first time, Lelouch's revolution is threatened not by force, but by hope. If Euphemia succeeds, the Japanese won't need Zero anymore. His rebellion collapses overnight. And what's worse is that Euphemia is actually Lelouch's friend. She truly cares about Nunnally. She believes in equality without violence. So Lelouch, he plans to meet her to do what he got to do. Kill her. Now, this isn't out of hate, but because peace built on Britannia's term is still slavery. Euphemia is being used as a political tool by the Empire, and Lelouch is too much of a genius and knows their 5D chess move, so he wants to counter it. But when they meet, something unexpected happens. It's crazy. Euphemia rejects the throne. She gives up her power to prove her sincerity. She truly wants peace, but Lelouch realizes that she's not even lying. What do I do now? So in that moment, Lelouch actually loses. His ideology collapses. He decides to let Euphemia have her peaceful Japan and admits defeat. But then tragedy strikes. Lelouch makes a fatal mistake. He jokes about using Geass to force her to massacre the Japanese. And this was just a thought in his head. He didn't even say out loud. But because his Geass is being used too much, it began mutating out of control and it activates on his own. Euphemia then ends up killing all of the Japanese, and Lelouch is panicking. He's like, what the hell is going on? I didn't want this to happen. He can't believe he made his sister do this. And in an instant, everything is destroyed. Euphemia loses herself. She orders the slaughter of civilians. People die screaming. Suzaku watches the girl he loves become a monster, and Lelouch realizes he just caused a genocide he never intended. But here's where he truly becomes terrifying, because Lelouch understands something crucial. He can't undo this. I might as well go along with it. So using his genius level intellect, he does that. So Lelouch takes full responsibility not to stop the massacre, but to weaponize it. He ends Euphemia's life gently and allows her to die believing she brought peace. And then he lies to the world. Britannia planned the massacre. Euphemia was a bloody princess. This leads to Japan erupting and rage spreading. The world turns on its heels, and from the ashes of her dream, Lelouch builds a war. The Black Rebellion now begins, and within hours, Lelouch mobilizes. Bombs detonate across Tokyo at midnight, collapsing infrastructure, severing communication, and trapping the Britannian forces. He commands multiple fronts simultaneously, where air forces destroyed by the Gawain, troops funneled into traps, propaganda controlled by Daitod's broadcasts. Basically, every move is synchronized. Every piece is accounted for. Even Cornelia, Suzaku, and Jeremiah, they're all being manipulated in different ways, and it plays directly into Lelouch's hands. This culminates in Cornelia's defeat. But after he reveals himself to her and learns that she doesn't know who killed his mom either, things take a turn for the worse. Nunnally is captured, and Lelouch's composure shatters once again. His perfect rebellion collapses under the weight of personal loss, proof that no amount of intellect can conquer emotion. Now, in the middle of commanding an army, Lelouch hears her voice through a transmission, and she's terrified, begging for help. And that's when Lelouch is actually defeated for one of the very first time. He makes the worst strategic decision of his life. Lelouch abandons the battlefield to save Nunnally's life. He leaves his army leaderless, and he walks away from Japan's liberation. He chooses Nunnally over complete victory. He could have just ended the series at season 1, but nah, the writers said we need a season 2 up in this. As a result, Britannia doesn't waste this opening. They crush the rebellion instantly. The Black Knights are overrun, and trust crumbles, and Zero disappears. This gets even worse. As Lelouch searches desperately for Nunnally, he is ambushed by Suzaku of all people. The masks are off. The lies are now over, and they finally face each other. Zero vs Lancelot, Lelouch vs Suzaku. Now, Suzaku knows Lelouch is Zero, and thanks to V2, the mysterious figure working behind the scenes of Britannia and the Geass Order, V2 reveals Lelouch's identity and powers to Suzaku, fueling his hatred. Suzaku doesn't arrest Lelouch as a criminal. He treats him like a monster who used the Japanese people for his own means. So Suzaku knocks him out and personally delivers his best friend to the Emperor himself. And this is where everything changes once again. Lelouch kneels before his father, Charles Vi Brittania, who controls the empire through his Geass. The Emperor reveals that he knows everything: Zero, Geass, C2, the rebellion, and with a single command, he erases Lelouch's memories of his rebellion and even his purpose, where he just tells tells him, "You shall live quietly as Lelouch." Everything he built is gone in an instant. Zero falls that day, or at least it looks that way, because now we are swiftly moving on to season 2, where Lelouch lives in ignorant bliss in a new life Charles had orchestrated for an entire year. But even with his memories erased, Lelouch's true nature never dies. He notices injustice instantly, like the executions in the street, the discrimination against 11s, and the brutality disguised as order. That's why, even without memory, Lelouch can't help but skip class, escape surveillance, dominate at chess, and gravitate towards chaos. Eventually, the remnants of the Black Knights find him, and C2 returns his memories. And the second this happens, a switch is flipped. He wastes no time being emotional. He snaps straight back into command, taking control of the Black Knights like he never left. And the cherry on top is that Kalin regains her full trust in him. We even see a flashback of his biggest op, Suzaku. He joined the Knights of the Round, a group that served directly under Charles, and Lelouch accused him of selling out his friend for a promotion. But Suzaku responds and acknowledges that he doesn't mind in order to further his goals. But Lelouch's next big brain move is sizing up the battlefield inside Babel Tower, where Charles's secret agents called the OSI tried to corner the Black Knights. This agency was specifically tasked by the Emperor to meticulously monitor Lelouch and hunt down C2. But Lelouch, he instantly flips the script by feeding them false confidence and letting them think every escape route is sealed, when in reality those controlled exits are exactly where he's planted his traps. So just when reinforcements arrive under Viceroy Calaris, Lelouch's plan hits its climax, as he had planted explosives across the tower and detonates them the moment Britannia overextends. The entire structure comes crashing down, destroying Calaris and his army beneath it. So as the dust settles, Lelouch does his, he has to do his mandatory evil genius love and says goodbye. The Black Knights then escape through the chaos, retreating to the Chinese Federation consulate, where with Lelouch's Geass, they are able to take refuge. Now, due to its nature of holding diplomatic immunity, Britannia can't touch them without sparking an international crisis. And with that, Lelouch dons the mask once more, hijacking Britannia's communication network and announces to the world, Zero has returned. However, for the past year, Lelouch has been living a lie, right? And he's forced to evaluate this fake reality, especially since his sister is missing and replaced by a phony spy of a brother named Rolo. Even worse, everyone's mind in the school is wiped and reprogrammed by his father Charles to reinforce the facade. But the thing is, Lelouch figures out the situation immediately so he can make his next genius move. Instead of panicking, he plays along. He pretends to be clueless whilst quietly testing the boundaries at Ashford Academy. And whilst Lelouch is under that surveillance, he has C2 impersonate Zero to avoid suspicion, gaslighting the OSI into thinking that there's a new Zero. However, the final key is Rolo. Not only is he undercover for the OSI, but he was raised as an assassin by Charles's Geass order, where of course he has a Geass of his own, which is the power to stop time. Well, kinda. He can freeze subjective time within a radius by paralyzing the perception of others around him. And after witnessing how insanely powerful Rolo can be, Lelouch makes his move to manipulate him. Rolo's loyalty isn't based on orders, but emotional dependence. His love for his fake brother in Lelouch is all artificial, but his need for it, that's real. And after spending a year in this relationship, Rolo has come to actually crave this warm feeling. Before this, he had nothing but loneliness. So Lelouch spots that flaw and decides to weaponize it by using Rolo's need for validation as his way to control him. Now at this point, Lelouch is juggling 3 major factions at once: Britannia, Britannia, the OSI, and the Chinese Federation. But somehow, my man is so smart, he fools all of them simultaneously. Rolo reports nothing unusual because Lelouch is controlling every move he sees. The Chinese Federation starts turning on itself, thanks to the subtle seeds of distrust that Lelouch planted through fake intel and political nudge. And Britannia, they believe Zero is reckless and cornered, exactly the image Lelouch wants them to buy into. All of this misdirection creates the perfect opening for his real objective, saving the captured Black Knights from execution. So Lelouch launches a rescue operation by challenging Knight of the Round Guilford to a formal duel, and he does it while piloting an old nightmare, deliberately flexing ego and confidence to sell the illusion that Zero is stronger than ever. He even frames the duel as a philosophical question. What do you do when there is an evil you cannot defeat by just means? Do you stain your hands with evil to destroy evil? Or do you remain steadfast, just, and righteous even if it means surrendering? But my guy Lelouch gives the answer. He says, bruh, in my case, I commit evil to destroy the greater evil, farming all kinds of aura. This is the moral challenge to Guilford, but also to the audience, justifying Lelouch's ruthless method. Then comes the brilliance. Lelouch uses a Geass government official to activate the elevated platform system in the Saitama ghetto, a direct callback to his Black Rebellion strategy. As the platforms rise and shift, the terrain collapses underneath Britannia's forces. Their army suddenly finds itself pushed into Chinese Federation territory, where they legally cannot engage, thanks to Li Jingkei's presence, a fierce warrior exceptionally skilled in close combat, and has the goal to re-establish the throne of China back to the royalty and away from the puppet government they currently have. So the result is that Britannia is trapped, Guilford is outplayed, and the Black Knights escape their execution. But then everything shatters. Nunnally is returning to Area 11 as the new viceroy, and she intends to revive the special administrative zone of Japan, the exact peaceful ideal Euphemia died to trying to create. So for Lelouch, this is devastating. He cannot fight his sister. He immediately abandons his plan because he refuses to oppose Nunnally's vision of peace. However, even with this setback, it becomes fuel for his new genius move. This inspires him to have the Black Knights exiled, protecting Nunnally and all of Japan from the chaos that the Black Knights create. Now, to Britannia, the newly revived special administrative zone, it would be a victory. Everyone believes Zero is surrendering when he proposes a deal. Exile Zero in exchange for allowing 1 million Japanese citizens into the zone. Britannia sees no threat in this, and Suzaku even supports the offer, thinking it will finally end the rebellion. But Lelouch, his plan has already begun. They're just not big brain enough. They're not on his level, because during the ceremony, he poses a question to Suzaku. Does being Japanese depend on bloodlines? And Suzaku answers no. And that single word traps Britannia morally and politically, because the moment he says it, all 1 million participants are wearing Zero masks. I mean, Zero is the one being exiled. If they're all Zero, Lelouch can bring his entire army with him to establish themselves in another country, the Chinese Federation, who he coordinated with beforehand to bring their giant ship to come pick them up. Now, the best part is Britannia can't stop them. Zero is to be exiled, and in their pride, they can't disobey that agreement. Even Suzaku can't act. His guilt over Euphemia, it paralyzes him, exactly as Lelouch predicted. However, there's one person in the entire world who can actually match Lelouch's move for move and his big brain, and his name is Schneizel Britannia. Whilst Lelouch is rebuilding the Black Knights, Schneizel makes his first major play on the global board. He tries to take control of the Chinese Federation by arranging a political marriage between its empress Tianzi and Britannia's first prince Odysseus. If the marriage succeeds, Britannia effectively absorbs the Federation, giving Schneizel control over half the world. But Lelouch cannot allow that. He infiltrates the engagement ceremony with the goal of stealing the empress and turning the Federation into an ally of the Black Knights. Lelouch can also expose the corruption of the eunuchs, the ruling council who don't serve the people, instead ruling through pure corruption, bribery and self-interest. But Schneizel, he's the only antagonist who doesn't fall for Lelouch's misdirection. In fact, he's the only guy Lelouch never beat in chess during childhood. So he sees through Zero's plan instantly, even predicting his escape routes before Zero can even execute them. And when Lelouch makes a bold King's Gambit style strategy to kidnap the Empress and force a diplomatic crisis, Schneizel counters flawlessly. For the first time, Lelouch isn't dictating the flow of battle. Now, if he's cornered, he will be unmasked and exposed in front of both nations, losing the entire war. Because guess what? Schneizel is basically Lelouch's perfect mirror. Lelouch believes the world must be destroyed and rebuilt, so the weak can finally live free, while Schneizel believes the world must be controlled from above, so chaos can never emerge. Schneizel basically sees humanity as irrational and dangerous, so he gambles on human failure, believing stability is only possible when free will is removed. He's willing to use weapons to enforce peace through fear. But our MC Lelouch, he gambles on hope and the change for a better future, even if he must become a demon to achieve it. This is showcased when Lelouch opens aggressively, declaring that in chess, the king must lead, and after a mental clash, putting him on the back foot, Lelouch bounces back hard. He already understands that the High Eunuchs are secretly selling the Chinese Federation to Britannia, and he knows Li Jingke's loyalty to the Empress, it will push him towards rebellion to rescue her. So in the chaos, he uses the moment to kidnap the Empress for himself, denying Schneizel the key piece he needs for the takeover. Lelouch also knows they won't harm the Empress due to her being their political tool. That predictability becomes their weakness, and then he plays the one move Schneizel never anticipates. He weaponizes the people. Lelouch broadcasts the eunuchs' corruption live across the nation, exposing how they plan to sell China to Britannia. The citizens then revolt instantly. The eunuchs lose all their power, and Britannia's entire strategy collapses without Lelouch firing a single shot. The arc ends with him at peak control, and he gains Jingke's loyalty, and he gives him coordinated attacks to earn a decisive victory. And so Lelouch now has the Chinese Federation under his thumb, one of the world's superpowers who will help him establish a new world order. This lays the groundwork for the United Federation of Nations in episode 16, a military alliance of 47 countries under one banner against Britannia under his command as Zero. But let's rewind a little, because things take a turn for the worse before Lelouch makes that big brain move. Firstly, he revealed himself to Jeremiah, who becomes his most loyal knight after learning Lelouch is Marianne's son, and he witnessed her last message. Jeremiah knows V2 betrayed her, and this is a major moment that explains why Orange joins his cause. Yet, before Lelouch can celebrate this new ally, Shirley is murdered by Rolo, not out of hate, but obsession. Terrified that she would take Lelouch away from him, fearing she will replace him emotionally. On top of that, Rolo believed Shirley would expose Lelouch's true identity after her memories had returned. Now, the OSI, they taught Rolo, anyone who knows too much must be eliminated. So he reverts to his assassin training when she mentions the intent to reunite Lelouch with Nunnally. Now, in return, Lelouch, he actually does crash out. He claims to forgive Rolo, but secretly rigs his Vincent with a bomb, intending to kill him. Now, this plan fails. He makes multiple attempts to kill his fake brother, but his redemption is just around the corner, and it did bring a tear to everyone's eye when it did arrive, so let's just wait for that to happen because it is absolutely peak. But essentially, Shirley's death pushes Lelouch into a darker path. He launches a full assault on the Geass order to kill V2. This would stop the production of future Geass users, and he can get another chance at uncovering the truth about his mother. But unfortunately, Charles gains immortality because he absorbs V2's code. This makes him unkillable by any physical means. So Lelouch realizes he can no longer defeat his father through assassination. But the crash out, it spirals downward even more. C2 loses her memories during the confrontation inside the Sword of Akasha, where Charles forces her to relive centuries of trauma, every betrayal, every supposed death and contract, basically every moment of loneliness that came with her immortality. Lelouch witnesses her past, but upon realizing her true desire, he returns to reality, proclaiming he shall be the only one to grant it. He attacks the Sword of Akasha and rescues C2, only to find she has lost all her memories. This moment, it basically leaves him completely alone. But this man, he isn't a wimp. His next 5D big brain move is already loading, the move that will set the stage for Zero Requiem. Now remember the 47 countries rallying together against Britannia? Well, basically the world is split into two warring factions between the UFN and Britannia. Both sides have equal gains and losses, and in order to break the stalemate and for UFN to liberate Japan, the leaders of the UFN and Britannia, they had determined that they need to secure Area 11, the tipping point of the conflict. So in anticipation, the Knights of the Round and Britannia's military are transferred to Japan. Nina asks to have the Lancelot equipped with the newly developed field limitary effective implosion armament warhead known as Flare. And guess what? The Emperor challenges Zero to a battle for the world itself. But fearing for Nunnally's safety, Lelouch calls Suzaku, begging him to rescue her. Suzaku agrees, but only on the condition they meet alone at the Kurigi Shrine. This brings us to one of the most devastating events in the series, the Battle of Tokyo. Lelouch is up against the Knights of the Round, Schneizel, and Suzaku at once. It's literally a boss rush of tough opponents. But he doesn't go for a direct assault. He starts by disabling the enemy entirely. He activates the Gifyun distributors across Tokyo, massive electromagnetic traps hidden in train lines. So in one move, Lelouch disables every 5th gen nightmare in the city, which makes Britannia's most advanced machines useless. And while Britannia's forces panic, Lelouch uses the Ikaruga, the aerial carrier, to dominate the skies. At the same time, he sends Rolo and his maid to rescue Nunnally, even when his own nightmare nearly gets destroyed by Anya's Hadron Cannon, or when his entire squadrons are wiped out, Lelouch doesn't crumble. In truth, he adapts instantly, redirecting Talon's Gurren to intercept Suzaku's assault. But then comes one of the most controversial moments in all of Code Geass, a consequence of Lelouch's own Geass command. During Season 1, Lelouch accidentally commanded Suzaku, "You will live," a permanent Geass that forces Suzaku's body to survive at any cost. And in this battle, that command finally detonates, because when pinned down by Talon's Gurren, one strike away from death, Suzaku's conscious mind refuses to surrender, but his Geass-compelled survival instinct, it takes over. Suzaku is forced to fire the Flare warhead, and the result is total devastation. This thing is a nuke on steroids. It destroys the Tokyo settlement and killed approximately 35 million people. Lelouch himself was in the blast radius, but was saved by Guilford, who urged him to live on. And worst of all, Nunnally is believed to be dead in the explosion. The battle ends immediately, and everyone is horrified. This isn't the victory Lelouch wanted. Schneizel makes his move whilst he is shattered, and the world is in shock. He steps forward as the voice of reason, offering peace to the UFN, but it's a trap that he's concocted. He invites the Black Knights and the UFN leaders to a meeting, and then drops the truth. Zero and Lelouch are the same person. He has all the proof from the OSI records, surveillance, proof that Geass exists, and Jeremiah's testimony. As a result, for the Black Knights who never knew Zero's true identity, this was an absolute nightmare. They suddenly realized Lelouch manipulated them by orchestrating their battles with lies. He Geassed them without their knowledge and is responsible for Euphemia's massacre and etc, etc, etc. So Schneizel basically frames Lelouch as the greatest threat to world peace. All our MC friends, they ditch him, but unlike a pussy, Lelouch says back. Zero Requiem depends on him becoming the villain, so he takes the blame, and the Black Knights execute the order to kill him, pointing their nines right at him. They got the guns out to kill him. But after losing Nunnally, Lelouch is ready to die. However, at the last moment, Rolo arrives and pulls him out, burning his life away using his Geass until his heart stops. In his final breath, he apologizes for being a fake brother, and Lelouch forgives him. I mean, this scene right here, the OST, the soundtrack, it made a grown man like me cry. The pain, the sacrifice, it had everything. Rolo felt like the 1 year he had with Lelouch was the only time he felt human, and this loss hardens Lelouch's resolve, burying his bro with his cherished necklace and learning that he actually loved him too. So now he understands what he has to do to finish the Zero Requiem plan, as all these lives lost can't be in vain. As a result, Lelouch finally confronts his father, Emperor Charles, but the unthinkable happens again. His mother, Marianne Vi Brittania, she's actually alive. After being killed years ago, it turns out his mother used her own Geass, a rare form of spiritual transference, to project her consciousness into the body of Anya, one of the Knights of the Round. She's been living inside Anya ever since, silently watching everything unfold. But that's not even the biggest reveal. Marianne has been working with Charles all along. She is a op too. In fact, from the very beginning, a contract was made between them all and C2, pursuing the Ragnarok Connection, a cosmic event meant to merge all human minds into one collective being. They believe if everyone shares one consciousness, humanity will finally be free from pain, lies, and conflict. They would achieve this by using the network of thought elevators spread across the world, combined with the Sword of Akasha and powered by two immortal codes, Charles and C2's. They plan to connect every human consciousness, both living and dead, through the collective unconscious, the so-called gods like they say. Now by doing so, they would destroy the gods themselves by erasing individuality, secrets, and emotion, unifying all people into a single existence. To Lelouch's parents, this was the ultimate peace, as everyone would fully understand each other. But this idea goes against all Lelouch stands for. A world without freedom, it would trap humanity in a static, unchanging existence. What would be the point of living? Nunnally's idea for a peaceful world where kindness is extended to everyone, that would cease to be and is a much better plan. So my man Lelouch, he decides to do the ultimate genius move he can think of to counter them. He teams up with Suzaku and C2. Now you're probably asking, why would Suzaku suddenly join him? Because in that moment, inside the Sword of Akasha, Suzaku finally saw the truth. Euphemia's massacre wasn't Lelouch's choice. His Geass malfunctioned. He sees his own sin too. He killed his father and lied to himself for years. Britannia never intended to reward him, and Charles' plan would erase Euphemia's dream entirely. So for the first time, Suzaku realizes he and Lelouch are the same. Both sinners, both broken, both trying to create a world where Euphemia and Nunnally's ideals can actually exist. So with nothing left to protect in the old world and no faith left in the Empire, Suzaku chooses to become Lelouch's sword, the only path left that could make Euphemia's hope real. So our MC, he literally says all men are not born equal. He's built different. His willpower is stronger than anyone else, where he activates the ultimate Geass command, unlocking it in both eyes. Lelouch's command spreads over the entire world, and the dark sea of C's world reacts to his will instead of Charles. The guidebook describes this moment as Lelouch imposing his will into the collective unconscious itself, overriding Charles's activation of Ragnarok. This is canonically described as Lelouch using Geass not on a person, but on the will of humanity called C's world. As a result, Charles and his mother are erased from existence, because once Lelouch rejected the Ragnarok Connection, the very system holding their consciousness together collapsed. But there's even more good news. Suzaku and Lelouch finally team up and become best friends again. Yay! They set out to create the ideal world with the Zero Requiem. This starts with Lelouch forcefully taking the throne of Britannia, declaring that he killed Charles and now by right is the 99th Emperor. He uses Geass to force the government and royal family into submission. He also appoints Suzaku as the Knight of Zero. Now at this point, Lelouch establishes himself as a tyrant. He abolishes the nobility, punishes corrupt corporations, and ends the numbered area system. Now while seen as good to people like Black Knights and rebellious people and common people, this is garnering resentment from the upper echelon of Britannian society, meaning that people who might have previously stood with him now hate him. Even the Knights of the Round rise against him, and Lelouch lets them. He sends only Suzaku to deal with them, and it's broadcast live to the world. He crushes the rebellion single-handedly, a spectacle that shows Britannia's invincibility whilst deepening the world's hatred for Lelouch. Then my guy, he shocks everyone. He declares that Britannia will join the United Federation of Nations, but this is just a performance to declare war on the entire world. At the World Summit, Lelouch promises diplomacy. He says Britannia will follow the UFN laws and will submit to its ideals. Everyone believes that, yeah, he's gonna do the right thing. But then he breaks every promise in one move. He calls Suzaku and the Lancelot into the room and he kidnaps the world leaders. And in that moment, he becomes the villain he's been carefully constructing since the start in season 1 episode 1. He wants the world united in hatred against him, because hatred is the only emotion powerful enough to unite all nations, and the world responds exactly as he predicted. They rise up together and creating the first true global unity. Even Schneizel of all people joined the resistance, wanting to use the chaos to fulfill his ideals. Schneizel calls checkmate, certain he's cornered Lelouch for good, but my guy has come too far to fall. Whether Nunnally understands it or not, he's going to create the world she's always dreamed of, even if she stands in his way. That means Schneizel is the final obstacle between Zero Requiem. The last battle then begins. Schneizel commands the Sky Fortress, which isn't just a weapon, it's the world's final line of defense against Lelouch, the ultimate deterrent meant to force global submission. Now Lelouch, he counters by launching a full-scale assault with the entire Britannian army at his command. He even places the world leaders aboard his flagship, the Avalon, knowing that Schneizel won't risk firing the nukes whilst they're on board. It forces his brother to hesitate, letting Lelouch dictate the tempo of the entire war. Every step Lelouch makes is perfect. He sacrifices territory, time, and even soldiers, pushing Schneizel into predictable positions. Schneizel responds, trying to outmaneuver him, deploying flare at strategic intervals, but Lelouch has already anticipated this. And when Schneizel finally plays his ultimate trump card, Lelouch turns it against him. He approaches the Sky Fortress, looking Schneizel directly in the eye, and uses Geass. The one man who could intellectually match him has now become a puppet and loses. And guess what? He doesn't stop there. With no other choice, he even uses Geass on Nunnally to obtain the key he needed, pretending absolute cruelty, acting like power is all he cares about, fully embracing the demon emperor persona even in front of the one person he loves the most and doing it for. Because at this stage of Zero Requiem, the world must believe that Lelouch is irredeemable, and Nunnally herself must believe it too. So by the end of the fight, the entire world is on its knees. Lelouch stands alone as the emperor of everything. Essentially, Lelouch and Suzaku, they design a plan so insane, so perfect, that it ends not just war, but the very need for war. Suzaku was purposely declared dead during the fight with Schneizel, allowing him to take up the mantle of Zero, a man solely standing for justice and defending the weak. On the other hand, Lelouch stages executions of his former allies and parades his power through Japan. And when the entire planet's eyes are on him, Zero appears, and in one swift motion, with the sad music playing, we're all crying our eyes out at this point, Suzaku plunges his sword through Lelouch's chest, and the demon emperor meets his end. Suzaku is condemned to live as Zero forever, sacrificing his identity for the world's stability, and Nunnally realizes the truth only as Lelouch dies in front of her, feeling his memories flood into her through touch, learning everything that he did since season 1 just for her and to create peace in the world. So Lelouch, he finally calls checkmate on the chessboard. He outsmarted everyone, saved the world, took it over just for his plan to work out in the end. Now in the aftermath, the world actually finds peace. The focus shifts from war to rebuilding, ending hunger, and curing poverty. Now if you want to learn if Lelouch actually became immortal in the end and did not die, support this videos by smashing the like button so I can do a follow-up. And to enjoy more peak fiction about a genius, watch our video about Death Note.